Spartans! Ready your breakfast and eat hearty. But tonight, we dine!
Nasty.
The fifth episode of the Tonight We Dine Nasty podcast. I'm Gerard, here with Brent.
Hey guys.
We're back at it, reviewing some divisions, and we're getting excited because we're about mid-July right now, which means that preseason and camps start opening within the month, and then we're going to be playing some fantasy football, some real fantasy football here in about 2 months, and that's a pretty exciting feeling.
Yeah, it's been kind of quiet as far as football related. We've had a lot of stuff going on otherwise in sports. U.S. women's national team, got a shout out to them, winning the Gold Cup and everything. Also had a lot of baseball, but
Who cares about
baseball?
We
We're
could
ready
talk
for
more
football.
hockey off season if we really wanted to, but
I don't know anything.
I'll save you guys that. For
However, New Jersey Devils, I did see that they acquired PK Subban.
They did.
Which that made my news. So if it makes my news, it must be pretty relevant in the hockey world.
Yeah, because Brent's pretty out of the hockey realm. So
You can say that.
Yeah. So I'm pretty impressed, Brent. You just impressed me right there that you would bring that up on our podcast. That's pretty special. So so talking about something else that was special, it was a huge trade that went down in our league 2 weeks ago.
Big news.
Yeah. Brent, you made the trade. I don't know if you want to announce it or if you want me to sum it up, and then you can say your half and I'll say mine. It's
Go
up
ahead
to
and
you.
sum it up, and then I'll come in.
So Brent has traded Darius Geis and Dallas Goedert, as well as a 2020 second and a 2021 fourth round pick to class of 2017, who's Malfi, in exchange for 3 first round picks, 2 of which are in the 2020 draft, and Sammy Watkins.
So there's been a lot of kind of going back and forth. Malf and I have kind of went, I would say for 2 years now, kind of talking about specifically with Darius Geis and kind of figuring out what deals that he's offering me and what deals that would be willing to accept. I've been standing pretty firm on that. I don't want to trade Darius Geis. I invested a lot in him. I traded back to Nick several years ago for the 1-2. I gave up the 1-7 in the 2018 draft and Mark Ingram for that pick to get Darius Geis. So it was a big acquisition for me. Like I loved him coming out of LSU. Obviously with the ACL tear last year, we haven't really got to see anything besides a few really big runs in the preseason last year. So it seems like it's kind of all hype right now with Darius Geis, but I love him. I think he's a tremendous value. That being said, I'm always trying to figure out what the next move would be and how can I get the best value at the time. So when 3 first round draft picks were on the table, obviously, I was kind of looking at it as 2 first-round draft picks for Geis, 1 first-round draft pick for Dallas Goedert. Also got Sammy Watkins in the deal as well, who I know Gerard has his own thoughts on Sammy Watkins, but I'm a believer, or more of a believer than he is with him. I think Sammy Watkins can still be a solid wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2. I think he has high wide receiver 2 upside. I'm not banking on him to be a wide receiver 1, but I think he can be a true wide receiver 2 for hopefully the next several years, especially in that Kansas City offense. And we have no idea what Tyreek Hill's doing, so he could find himself suspended. It sounds like he's kind of escaped with maybe a 4 to 6 game suspension. They haven't announced it yet, But anyway, so going back to the trade, I felt like with that value, I can move on, obviously, and I don't know how much you want to say, but I feel like we talked about Darius Geis, but Dallas Goedert is a huge piece of this. I think he's on the rise. He's obviously behind Zach Ertz, but the Philadelphia Eagles have said, we want to run 2 tight end sets. We want to really kind of make this a high-powered offense. Carson Wentz is a year and so removed from the ACL tear. And I think that offense is going to be really efficient, and Goddard, I think, will step into that number one tight end spot probably by 2020, with kind of Zach Ertz maybe being out the door, depending on what they do with contract-wise. So in the long run, I feel like it probably is a pretty fair deal. Obviously, short term, I feel like class of 2017 bettered himself this year, and that's kind of what he wanted to do. He wanted to go for the title this year, but long term, depending on how that 2020 draft shapes up, I think I've put myself in a really good position to come out with two strong options at maybe running back or wide receiver in that class.
And I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum. I see this trade as a gross overpay on the end of class of 2017. I think you hit it on the head when you said that Darius Geis is kind of an unknown. He's coming off an ACL tear. The team that invested a 4th-round draft pick last year went out and spent another draft pick on Bryce Love this year. They brought back Adrian Peterson. Chris Thompson is still there. And reports on how he's recovering from his ACL tear have not been positive. So pretty much you give up, let's say, just in your state, that he gives up 2 first-round picks just for Darius Geis. I think a first-round pick for Dallas Goedert, or a first-round pick and Sammy Watkins for Dallas Goedert, a second-round pick and a 4th-round pick is a gross overpay for Dallas Goedert. So I think it's an extremely risky pick. I think Malf, and we'll get into John's trades later, but I think Malf has struck the jackpot by having a second-round pick that John was just itching to get back into the second round for. He could have walked away with the best player. He's probably going to have the number 1 draft pick. That 2020 draft pick is probably going to be the number 1 draft pick next year.
Here's hoping.
Think that number 1 draft pick is going to be better than Darius Geis ever will be. So just putting that in perspective, then he gives up potentially a mid-round, potentially a late number 1 draft pick. I think both of those number 1 draft picks end up being, definitely combined, better than Darius Geis. Potentially individually, both better than Darius Geis.
Well, I think if you're looking at two, especially but that's hype too. We can talk about the hype around Darius Geis, but the hype around the 2020 class is just that. I'm buying into it. I think it's going to be a great class. I think it's going to be deep in running back, and they're even saying now it's going to be really deep with the receivers. But that also depends on who comes out. There's always injuries. So depending on what happens in this year of college, that's a whole nother year that we're looking towards. So that's the fall of 2020 until I can kind of look at that and say, okay, this is what I really got in talent-wise. If Darius Geis goes out even this year and puts up running back 2 numbers, that's going to be enough. He's young enough to say, yeah, he could be doing this for the next 5 to 6 years.
I don't think running back 2 numbers, even for the next 5 to 6 years, justify 3 first-round picks.
Well, I'm not saying running back 2 numbers. I'm saying that running back 2 numbers this year with the potential of being maybe Zeke Elliott in the future.
I'm not even going to entertain that. But moving on a little bit, just to a different point about the trade, I think that you and Malf are in very similar positions in the sense that you've traded a lot of your depth to acquire high-end talent this offseason. And this puts you in a position now where you can go into your 2020 draft, which you didn't have a lot of draft picks. I don't think you had a first. You have a second, right? But
I have a second.
You just gave it up.
So I ended up having 2 seconds because I still have a second left.
So you didn't have a first. You had 2 seconds. You didn't have a third.
Yeah.
I don't think you had a fourth. You might have a fifth.
Yeah, I think it's just I had a second and a fifth, and now I have 2 first, a second, and a fifth.
Yeah. So, with how deep this class is supposed to be, how strong it's supposed to be at running back, how strong it's supposed to be at receiver, you've got a real opportunity next year to bolster your depth. I don't see how class of 2017 benefits and bolsters his depth by giving up 2 first-round picks. I understand the win now mentality, but I think the win now mentality doesn't mean trash your future. And with the luxury of having 3 first-round picks, maybe he couldn't get Darius Geis for 2 first-round picks, but he could have tried. And I think that that's just kind of where the gross overpay comes in for me, because I don't think that his price is worth what he's getting back. Dallas Goedert, 20th best tight end last year, might make a slight improvement this year, but we made that trade. We made this trade in our other league when we traded Goddard to him in our other league. We traded we got 2 third-round picks back. Is that correct?
No, we got one. I can't remember what it was.
We got James Washington and a third next year.
Yeah.
For Dallas Goedert. And you got Sammy Watkins and a first. Granted, you threw in a second and a fourth,
Sure.
a year and a half or 3 years from now. But I think that it's an aggressive move, and I see that he's trying to win now.
Sure.
I just don't know if that's the recipe when you have teams like Jared's team, which is loaded from top to bottom.
Sure.
And you go through his bench, and you're like, wow, he's going to continue to be good. Yeah. And then we're going to break down his draft today and how he continues to add to that depth and makes his team even better. Mike's team was perennial 2 years ago and is now looking to get back without 11 guys on IR. I don't think that this is a move to put Malfi where he wants him to, because I think he's mortgaging the future at this point.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. I think in dynasty leagues you need depth. Like that's the way that you're going to win long term. You're going to have depth. But I'm looking at his roster right now, and he has a solid top to bottom at least starters. He's going to throw out great starters, and with the potential of Chris Godwin and Mike Williams could bust into the top 10 for wide receivers this year. There's real potential for that. He already has 2 top 10 wide receivers in Antonio Brown and Devontae Adams. So he's throwing that out just wide receiver wise. Sony Michel, Dalvin Cook, obviously top 10, top 15 running backs. And then now on his bench, depending on what happens, Corey Clement, depending on where he's at, there's reports out of Philly, he's looking good. Obviously, Miles Sanders is there, but they're going to kind of slowly integrate him into the offense. I can't remember, I think his name is Justin Jackson, but depending on what happens with Melvin Gordon in the future, he could kind of see something moving forward. Obviously, Darius Geis is on his bench now. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, who I think is going to kind of come in and replace Alshon Jeffrey. So I'm just looking at the bench, and I'm not saying that it's completely this like perennial like depth and that sort of thing, but there's pieces there, and I think you can build on that. And I don't think it's a sacrifice. Like I think he sacrificed for kind of the future, but I don't think it's such a tremendous. I don't think it's going to make his team regress. Yeah, at least in the next 2 years. And
you talk really high of Darius Geis there. I think I kind of listed the reasons why I don't think Darius Geis is a huge bump up this year, just with AP still being there and Chris Thompson and Bryce Love's going to get some action. So, I don't think Darius Geis is going to step in and have unless he really impresses, which I don't know why you would, if he was really impressing, why you would bring AP back, why you would draft another running back. Unless he really impresses, I don't see that being his backfield. And it might be his backfield in the future, but there's just as much risk in taking Darius Geis right now as there is in that unknown draft pick that you have next year twice in the first round and the year after that in the first round. I think that it goes, and then you have all this trading capital now. Your team is good enough as it is, and then you walk into 4 first-round draft picks, just as many as Nick, who really needs that draft help. And we kind of hit on it earlier. How do you find your studs in a dynasty league? You'll find them on the free agency market. You probably got to give up studs to get studs through a trade. You find them through the draft. And I'm not saying that he can't take a second-round pick and find a stud in the second round, but it's more likely that he's going to find that stud in the first round.
Sure.
And he just gave up 2 opportunities next year and another opportunity the year after that. And to me, it seems a little mortgagey to me.
Yeah.
By the way, if anyone wants to give me 3 first-round picks for any of my players, come talk to me. We'll get a deal done, because that's something that I will take in a heartbeat. Brent, would you like Joe Mixon for your 2 first-round picks and 1 in 2021?
We could definitely talk about that.
We can talk about it.
I wouldn't be opposed to having that conversation, but
Yeah.
this isn't a trade show. So
This is not a trade show.
Let's get to what we were kind of talking about, because, and going back to that, sorry, I wouldn't have done the trade if I didn't feel like I was getting at least a really good deal. I'm not saying that I have to win every trade that I do, but I believe that for the value, that was enough to sacrifice giving up Darius Geis and Dallas Goedert. I feel like I got a good haul for that.
Well, you were saying that you were looking to get Sammy Watkins in with the 3 first-round picks. It would have been a lot cheaper for me, Mal, if I just would have taken the 3 first-round picks. You could have kept Sammy Watkins, put him on your IR if you wanted to, because that's where he's going to spend half the year anyway. So, you know me, Brent. I'm not. You said you're not. I'm not as much of a believer in Sammy Watkins as you. I'm not a believer at all. So I'm more of a hater of Sammy Watkins.
No love for Sammy, who was a first-round pick. Obviously, he gets injured. We know this, but if anybody can revitalize his career, it's going to be Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes. So I'm banking on that Kansas City
last
offense.
year. We had a bet last year that
And
Sammy Watkins
great.
would play 10 games and catch 50 balls. And that was Brent's side was 10 games and 50 balls. And he played 10 games and did not catch 50 balls.
He got like 48.
And the year before, he got like 38 balls. He's lucky he had like 11 touchdowns with the Rams.
That was a bad offense that he was in.
Yeah, that was a bad offense. He's been playing in bad offenses the last 2 years. I mean, when he was on the Bills offense, that was a good offense. And that's why he shined. But he's been playing with bad Kansas City and LA offenses and hasn't been able to.
He was putting up, if he would have played a true 14 games, which I don't know if he will ever play, but if he was playing even 12 to 14 games, I think he is a productive enough wide receiver that he is going to put up. He could catch 50 to 60 balls easily this year.
I think he's target number 4 on that team, and I think that he doesn't. He'll have big games. He'll have big games, but he's probably getting the majority of his stats in about 3 games this upcoming year. And I'll bet on that as well.
You want to make that bet again?
I mean, I will make that bet again, because even if Tyreek Hill is out 4 to 6 games, guess what? Sammy Watkins still isn't catching 50 balls.
All right, write it down. He's 10 games. He has to play at least 10 games, but he's catching 50 balls.
50 balls.
We're betting again.
Not happening.
All right, let's get to
All
the
right,
draft.
Moving on to Division 2. Last time we wrapped up Division 1, I shit on the NJ Giants draft. I praised everything must go, and then we kind of laughed about Amir Abdullah's being Mr. Irrelevant, and Will had a decent draft, so we kind of praised him. But this we're going to move into Division 2. Division 2 is West Coasters, that's Jarrett's team, the Dominators, which is Rob's team, and the Jets are on the clock, which is John's team. We're going to save the Jets are on the clock for the end, because I think that will bring up the most discussion. But let's start with the best team in this division. Somebody who can't seem to find a win in the playoffs, but finds plenty of them in the regular season, in West Coasters. He goes Kyler Murray at 1-8, Andy Isabella at 2-8, Bryce Love at 3-8, and then doesn't have a 4th-round pick and picks Karan Higdon at 5-8. Brent, why don't you
let's start.
break down what you like most about the draft?
Yeah, let's start right at that 1-8 spot. So Kyler Murray, obviously in a super flex league, they are talking that he's going to be the 1-1. So that's over N'Keal Harry, over Josh Jacobs. Like in a super flex league where you could play 2 quarterbacks, obviously Kyler Murray would be the 1-1 in a lot of people's eyes. So that just kind of tells you where he's at. I think in startup drafts right now, he's kind of between quarterback 8 and quarterback 12 moving forward in Dynasty, which that's just unbelievable. So I think coming in to an air raid offense, a new coach is coming in. Like there's so many questions, but if there's anybody that can do it, it seems like this is going to be the guy. So obviously his measurables are a little. He measures in at a little shorter than most any other quarterback who's ever played the position at a successful level. Baker Mayfield obviously kind of bucked that trend last year and was the number one quarterback taken off the board to Cleveland last year and proved all the doubters wrong. Came in, very good accuracy. Now Baker is probably in that quarterback 1 to 3 range for dynasty moving forward. So if that is the ceiling for Kyler Murray, which I think it could be, this is going to look like a great pick. It's and I can't remember who West Coasters has. I think he has just Kirk Cousins.
Just
on
Kirk
his.
Cousins.
So he has an offense where Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. He didn't have any other quarterbacks on his roster. So bringing in Kyler Murray, even if you're giving up a late first round pick, I think it's great value. And for the team that he has around it, I think Kyler Murray makes so much sense because obviously if Murray does kind of maybe not even hits his ceiling, but if he kind of produces, comes in and puts up even 20-point games, 25-point games, that's going to be a solid thing for a team that's already putting up. I mean, some weeks he would put up damn near 200 points.
Well over 200 points. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I agree for for his team, this pick is the right pick. Kind of just being a hater a little bit today. But Kyler Murray is not someone who I'm super high on. I could be wrong, but just something about Kyler Murray just doesn't scream Baker to me. Like I was big on the quarterbacks last year. I just felt like more value last year, and when you can grab some of those quarterbacks, I think Darnold went in the second round of our rookie draft last year. Pick like 11 and 12 is around where, or Baker went later than that. Lamar Jackson went in the back of our first round, and I got Josh Rosen at the back of the second. Granted, Josh Rosen sucks, but just saying where the quarterbacks went. But I think I think for Jarrett's team, Kyler Murray makes a ton of sense. The one comment I was going to make was Noah Fant was on the board. I thought Jarrett would take the initiative and try to shore up his tight end position, but he does have Chris Herndon, who's a solid tight end who had a good rookie year. Kind of another thing that you don't see is tight ends have solid rookie years, and the fact that Herndon was able to put in such a strong year kind of makes you think that that's going to continue. I know that there's some suspicion that he might be suspended for a couple games due to some off-field issues. But
it's dating back to last year, so it's an incident that I think he had in January maybe, or maybe not last year, but
a while ago.
I think it was playoff time, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think, like, you know, he could have found other value there, probably a better pick, but like you said, for his team that's got no weaknesses up and down the lineup, and the only thing is Kirk Cousins, which is probably the reason why he hasn't won a playoff game, because Kirk Cousins likes to play, you know, week like 1 through 10-ish.
Sure.
And he doesn't really like to play the rest of the year when the games actually matter. So you know, he could definitely get someone like Kyler Murray, and if Kyler Murray ends up being a Baker Mayfield, like you said, a quarterback 1 to 3 moving forward, his team's gonna be unstoppable. It's just not going to be fair because it's going to be dominant up and down the lineup.
Yeah. And what they always talk about is that Konami code. I hear that with podcasts that I listen to, the Konami code. So you always want in fantasy and dynasty, you're wanting that quarterback that can do both, that can pass as well as run. So Kyler Murray is obviously going to do that. I mean, I don't know how much you're going to put him in run first opportunities, but I think an air raid attack is going to give you those options. So I think we're going to see him probably. I wouldn't be surprised if he's getting 50 to 60 rushing yards a game.
I think that's just, I mean, if you're going to be dropping back that much, don't know how good Arizona's defense is going to be.
That offensive line's a little shoddy.
Yeah, so he's probably going to be scrambling a lot. They're probably going to be down in games, so he's going to be in situations where he's going to have to throw the ball. I mean, it's completely justified that he could come up with 50, 60 rushing yards weekly and just add to whatever else he's putting up through the air.
Yeah. The next pick, Andy Isabella.
Yeah.
This is a guy that I love. I think that, again, coming into that Arizona offense, he's kind of positioning himself to be maybe their third receiver right now. I think he's going to easily transition in their number 2, Larry Fitzgerald, kind of on his way out. Obviously, they brought in Hakeem Butler and some other rookies. I think Keyshawn Johnson. But I think just that Arizona offense, what they want to do, they want to get speed on the field, and Andy Isabella was the fastest wide receiver at the combine this year. I think he ran it was either a 4.2, 40, I can't remember exactly the time, but he just blew people away.
And very positive reports out of camp about he is outplaying Hakeem Butler. So kind of the rookie wide receiver competition that was anticipated going into the year is one that looks like Isabella has the upper hand right now. And, especially with the difference in the draft capital of Hakeem Butler going 1.6 and Andy Isabella going 2.8, it really looks like a good pick here for him to get a receiver that might be an impact now kind of guy.
Yeah, I think he dropped. Too much in the draft. I probably would have went for him probably early second round at that 2-1, 2-2 position. Just kind of on the upside, the speed, the air raid attack, what Arizona wants to do with the ball, kind of moving forward, get like what we were talking about. Kyler Murray's going to have
opportunity moving forward with Fitz most likely retiring at the end of the year.
Yep, and in all honesty, I think that Hakeem Butler, I think he's a tremendous, obviously, size, just a tremendous red zone attack sort of guy. But I think for what Arizona wants to do, they're gonna line up a lot of Christian Kirk, they're gonna line up a lot of Andy Isabella, and they're just gonna kind of say go out there and whoever's in the slot, I think they're just going to be throwing the ball all over the place. So I think Andy Isabella really has an opportunity to shine even in his rookie year.
And then he follows it up with Bryce Love in the third round. Bryce Love is definitely a pass-catching back. It goes to Washington, and I think he could really benefit there, especially with Chris Thompson's health issues, where he's playing about 8 games a season. I think Bryce Love steps in after Chris Thompson goes down for the year or has an extended stretch where he's not playing, and there's some viability there. Talk about another team that's probably going to be down often and having to throw the ball. And they picked up some receivers as well, so we'll see who kind of comes out of the mix to be the guy in Washington, but it could be a lot of checkdowns, and Bryce Love could benefit, and West Coasters benefits if Bryce Love does.
And you're talking about Bryce Love, a guy who followed Christian McCaffrey at Stanford. He, I don't obviously have his stats in front of me or anything, but he put up tremendous rushing yards the year after Christian McCaffrey left. It was unbelievable, and people thought he was going to come out after that. However, he didn't. He suffered an injury. He's kind of recouping that. So obviously his stock is a little down, or it was down going into the draft. But I think if he was full health coming out of the 2018 season or 2017 season, I think NFL teams would have looked at him a lot different than they did, and maybe even drafted him in the second round.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then just quickly to hit on Karan Higdon, Jared has Deontay Foreman. Karan Higdon's an undrafted rookie running back, but personally, that Houston backfield looks open to me. Lamar Miller is a workhorse, but he's not going to be a workhorse for much longer. A lot of questions about the Achilles and Deontay Foreman. So Karan Higdon could be someone who maybe if Foreman's not back, if Miller goes down, get some work, and for a 5th round pick, that's all you could ask for is some sort of fantasy relevance. But we'll see if he makes the team.
Yeah, you just kind of shoot for the stars there, but I don't know how that. I haven't really looked at how that's shaping up to be with the Texans' backfield. But like you said, he's got a lot of competition even just to make that roster. So, but if he sticks, I definitely see the opportunity there.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll move on quickly to Rob. We already had a show breaking down Rob's draft, so I don't think we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time here. Rob coming in with the 4th and the 5th pick in the first round. I personally feel like, I didn't say it to his face in that episode, but I personally feel like he left some value on the table there, not going with Miles Sanders.
I agree.
Or picking DK Metcalf where he did. I don't know if Metcalf is a 1-4 caliber receiver. However, with the Doug Baldwin retiring, obviously that bumps his stock up a little bit, and Russell Wilson's a great deep ball thrower, so DK Metcalf could definitely benefit, but he's going to be more of a boomer bust kind of guy over a consistent player. But I think maybe a Miles Sanders. Also, you're talking to two people who have completely different mentalities when it comes to how to build a roster. Love my running backs. Brent loves his receivers. So I probably would have went with Miles Sanders if I was in that position. Brent probably would have went with A.J. Brown because he loved A.J. Brown, but got him at 111. But less his trade. I think Rob has a solid draft with T.J. Hawkinson at the 5th overall pick that addresses a position that he's been bouncing back and forth with the hurt Bengals tight ends, whether it's Usama or Croft or Eifert.
Well, I think T.J. Hawkinson comes into Detroit offense. I mean, he has all of it. And again, we talked with Rob about this, but he can block. So just having a blocking tight end out there who can do that, he's going to be on the field most times. So he's obviously a good receiving tight end as well, being drafted in the NFL draft at the 8th overall position. So they see somebody who's going to really kind of open up that passing attack and also help in the run game for Kerryon Johnson and that Detroit backfield. So I see T.J. Hawkinson kind of probably slipping into that top 10 tight end this year.
And then I really like his next two picks. He goes with Alexander Mattison, and he also goes with Benny Snell. I like Alexander Mattison because Dalvin Cook has been injury-prone the last 2 years, obviously with the ACL, and then last year he missed some time. Latavius Murray is no longer there. Granted, there's a couple other guys. Well, we've mentioned them way too much on this podcast. Mike Boone and what's the other guy's name?
Who is that other guy? Mike Boone
and Rock Thompson.
Thomas.
Yeah. Rock Thomas. Way too many times. It's the third mention of the backups in the Minnesota backfield in 5 episodes. So we'll try to cut down on our Rock Thomas commentary
Mike
moving
Boone
forward.
commentary.
But you get Alexander Mattison, and he's someone who people are pretty high on. They think he could step in if Dalvin Cook goes down. So just kind of one of those depth moves that could really benefit mid-year when a lot of teams are struggling with injuries. Same thing with Benny Snell. We saw last year James Conner miss some time. They used him heavily. Jalen Samuels kind of like a gadget kind of pass-catching guy. So if James Conner misses any time, I think Benny Snell runs in there, and he probably does pretty well. I know Brent and I kind of think differently, and Benny Snell just in general, or Benny Snell is pretty slow. Benny Snell, the nickname, is pretty slow, but for playing in the SEC, being the only threat on that Kentucky offense and playing as well as he did, I feel like he's someone almost in the line of like Kerryon Johnson. I know Kerryon Johnson, just not like lightning speed, but is someone who is just a really smart football player, hits the holes, uses his leverage and his body well, and picks up as many yards as he can. I think he might be the leading rusher in Kentucky history.
Very well could be.
Someone who on a team that was really bad had a lot of success in college in a really tough conference, which should translate well coming to the NFL in granted a tough division, but used to running and gaining those hard, difficult yards on a good offense. So
I'm kind of on the opposite end here. Like I hear the name Alexander Mattison, I hear the name Benny Snell. I don't really see much of a difference in either one of them. I would have to look who was around these picks when Dominators was selecting to see who I would have selected otherwise, but neither one of those names just kind of jump out to me. I think what you said, I think Dalvin Cook is, unless there's an injury, and some people would say he's injury prone, I think Dalvin Cook is going to be a top 5 to 10 running back this year. I think he's going to prove himself to be pretty dependable and reliable in that offense. So in all honesty, I don't know if I see much opportunity for Alexander Mattison. I don't know how he's going to run. Like, obviously we'll get a kind of a glimpse at that in the preseason, but I could kind of see him just kind of fading to the Mike Boone, Rock Thomas kind of just another Vikings backup running back. When I hear Benny Snell, there's actually, I think, more opportunity for him in that Pittsburgh offense, because I don't know how sold I am on James Conner. I feel like James Conner he hasn't done it for a whole year. Like, he produced, he did what he needed to do. He got hurt towards the end of the year, but
you also wonder how much just Pittsburgh in general like rallied around James Conner with the whole Le'Veon Bell holdout. Like, they're really gonna show the world that James Conner is just as good as Le'Veon Bell. Then you also lose Antonio Brown, which kind of, I don't know, I feel like kind of condenses the box instead of spreads the field out. And with that lack of space, does that hurt him? I mean, Pittsburgh's a good offense. I assume that James Conner will be an RB2 if he's healthy, if not an RB1. But does the offense change a little bit missing a guy like Antonio Brown, who's probably the best receiver in football?
Yeah, and it very well could. But I would argue that just a team like Pittsburgh is kind of like that New England offense. It's just, I think whoever you put back there, it's more on scheme. Like, I think James Conner is a great running back, or maybe not a great running back, but a good running back. I think he got a great opportunity last year. I think, like you said, they rallied behind him. He has a great story with overcoming cancer and battling that diagnosis. It was just great. Obviously the Lev Bell stuff kind of took over the headlines last year, and then James Conner just ran with it, and it was a tremendous story. Moving forward, I don't know if James Conner is the best running back on that team right now. I don't know if that's Benny Snell. I don't know if that's Jalen Samuels. But I would say there's more uncertainty in the Pittsburgh Steelers.
There's a competition.
Yeah, there's definitely competition.
Alexander Mattison is only relevant, most likely, if Dalvin Cook is hurt. Yeah. Just like Latavius Murray is only relevant if Dalvin Cook is hurt. But probably with Benny Snell, he might have some relevance even if James Conner is healthy. So I guess we'll see how that goes moving forward. We're just going to breeze over these last two picks because we did a whole episode on Rob already.
Well, no, wait. Let's give a little bit of time to Gary Jennings. Out of West Virginia, he was one of Will Greer's favorite targets. I love the guy. So
all right, that's enough time.
I think, here's a hot take for you. I think that Gary Jennings might outplay DK Metcalf over the career in Seattle.
All right.
Just saying.
You heard it here first. And without further ado, we will move on to John's draft because we are running long, and this is the draft. Yeah, this is the draft that I think we wanted to talk about the most. First of all, let's just talk about the picks and not how he got them. And then we'll talk about how he got them and wrap up with that. So Josh Jacobs first overall. John barely has any running backs, real depth in general. So getting Josh Jacobs, someone who can step in day one, contribute in his first year, as long as he doesn't hold out in Oakland, is someone who is much needed on John's roster. And I think the move up to 1 is warranted because I don't think that N'Keal Harry or whoever would have been picked at 2 if Nick wasn't picking could have as much of an impact on John's roster as Josh Jacobs can.
Do you want to talk about these now, or did you want to talk about the other guys on the... Anyways, I'll just talk about Josh Jacobs. So Josh Jacobs, I feel like it's going to be a good running back for the Oakland Raiders. We're not talking about how he got the draft picks yet. We can talk about that later.
We will talk about that later.
Josh Jacobs finds himself in an offense that they want to run the ball. They invested he has high draft capital. They invested a first-round pick. He's going to get opportunity. They don't really have anybody behind him. Marshawn Lynch kind of exited and
hey,
whatever.
Doug Martin's back.
Doug Martin re-signed because Isaiah Crowell got injured. So it's an old running back roster. I think they still have Jalen
still have
Richard. Chris Warren from the practice squad last year. We'll see. I think he's just going to kind of fade into non-existence there, maybe back on the practice squad. Unless they're barring injury, I think Josh Jacobs is going to be a solid contributor moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and then in the second round he picks McCole Hardman, which, seeing the lack of suspension, the lack of cut to Tyreek Hill, I think kind of looks like a reach at this point, but I think with the hype at that point, thinking McCole Hardman is the replacement for Tyreek Hill. He's quick. He does all the things that Tyreek Hill does. Probably not as good as the receiving part, but he can do all the gadget stuff. You got to take a risk there.
I felt like it was a little bit of a reach, but I understand it. You pick him in the second round. You're saying just what you said. He's going to fill in for Tyreek Hill. At that time, we thought Tyreek Hill might be basically
exiled from the
league, but we're seeing now, which I don't understand, but he's getting maybe a 4 to 6 game suspension, which is insane, but that's not for me to decide. Mm-hmm. But looking at it now, McCole Hardman kind of looks like a very much of an overreach at that position in the second round with all the, we just talked about it. Andy Isabella was still on the board. I don't know if Deebo Samuel, but some of these other...
Deebo Samuel went one before. Jalen Hurd was someone who was picked after him. I don't really know who those middle picks were.
We know McLaren from Washington and Harmon from Washington. So some of these other guys that I think I would take more of a chance with over McCole Hardman even at that time. I definitely feel like if we were doing this draft again, I would think we'd see probably McCole Hardman in the 4th to 5th round.
Yeah. Well then, like to follow that up, he gets a 3rd round pick, he gets a 4th round pick, he picks Deontay Johnson out of Pittsburgh, and he picks Terry McLaurin out of Washington. So maybe a reach, but like a high risk, high reward pick in the second round, but then he gets 2 guys who go later in the draft than they probably should have in the 3rd and 4th round, which kind of make up for it. So, Terry McLaurin, he's got the history with Dwayne Haskins. They went to college together. They've got the rapport. He is in a position where he can step in Washington and be that slot guy with Jamison Crowder gone. What's his name probably doesn't even need to be mentioned, so we're not going to because I can't think of his name.
Who are you talking about, Trey Quinn?
No, the other guy who...
Because Trey Quinn is going to be that slot guy in Washington. I think McLaren can be a really go-to guy because Washington's depth at receiver is just really...
What's that guy's name? Doxson.
Oh, Josh Doxson. You don't even need to mention him. He's gonna be out of Washington. He's gonna be out of Washington next year. So really, they have Paul Richardson and Josh Doxson as their receivers, and Trey Quinn. And I think Trey Quinn is going to be a really nice slot guy for them. Mm-hmm. But I think Kelvin Harmon and Terry McLaurin can come in and be those X and Z wide receivers.
Yeah. And then he picks up Elijah Holyfield. It was in the late 4th round. I mean, maybe early 5th. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember. But Elijah Holyfield is one of those. He went to Carolina. He's going to be behind Christian McCaffrey. I don't really see much there.
I think that's a taxi squad stash, if not just a cut, just a dart late in the draft and see what happens.
Oh, absolutely.
But then I do like, last episode kind of took a lot of shots about picking a backup tight end in San Francisco. I do like this tight end pick. In the 5th round, he picks Caleb Wilson out of Arizona. Kind of just like open season there. There's not really... I don't know much about Caleb Wilson. I don't know if he's more of a blocker. Don't know if he's more of a pass catcher. All I know is that there's opportunity in Arizona.
You have Charles Clay. You have Ricky Seals-Jones, who hasn't really fired yet.
Yeah.
A lot of hype around him, but he hasn't really fired. So, there's absolutely
just opportunity. And at 5, whatever he made this pick at,
take a shot on tight end at the end there.
Yeah. But overall, you look at his draft and you say, you know what? That's a really solid draft. Obviously he comes away with 6 picks. He's away with 6 picks. He probably gets 3 solid players. He gets 1 really upside player, and then he gets 2 darts. and we'll see what happens there. But that's what you want out of a draft. So I think that's a really solid draft when you look at it. The problem that I have, and I'm not going to harp on this too much, and Brent, I'll let you
Let's talk about
get
how
on
he
a
got
soapbox
those.
if you want. Actually, I don't really know what I want to say. I was going to say this draft looks really good. If he didn't give up his entire 2020 draft to pick these guys who might be depth receivers, who probably don't have the potential to be the number ones on their team, it's looking a lot better. Let's go to the Josh Jacobs trade. He starts with the 1-2, and he starts with the 2-2 to get up to the 1-1. I don't think that's necessary. He doesn't need to go. He doesn't need to offer you 3 first-round picks for Darius Geis to then settle, right away. You got to go low. Maybe even a first and a third next. When he says no, a first and a second next. Just building that. You don't need to go, let me give you 3 first-round picks for this one player, or let me give you my top 2 draft picks to move up 1 spot in the first round. It just doesn't make sense. Granted, Jacobs is the top of the class, but it doesn't need to be the 2-2 that he's losing just to move up 1 spot.
And especially when you're looking at what he's doing as far as building a dynasty roster. I would consider Jets Are on the Clock as kind of in that rebuilding. I don't know if he would feel this way, but I definitely feel like it's more of a rebuilding kind of project right now. So with rebuilding projects, what you don't want to do is give away high draft picks. And Josh Jacobs, like you said, he might have, if you could get him for the 1-2 and the 3-2, okay, that's a little bit more reasonable. But
you're still
giving
getting
up that
2 top 14 guys in this draft potentially.
Exactly.
But then to scramble and throw away your 2020 draft to get back into the 2019 draft, knowing how hyped the 2020 draft is, you just got to be realistic about your roster. If you look at your roster, you look at Jarrett's roster, you look at Mike's roster, you look at Will's roster, you compare it to John's roster, there's a clear difference in the talent that's on his roster and the talent that's on the top end teams. So you just have to know that going into next year, it's like Nick. Going into this year, going into next year, Nick knows he needs as many draft picks as he wants because he needs to rebuild through the draft. And I understand John wanting to get back in this draft, to get those draft picks, to pick some guys to build his depth, but it doesn't need to be at the expense of next year's. Potentially, there's only one place he can improve in the draft, and potentially a better draft pick next year with a better class than this year's 2019.
And in all honesty, now looking at it, it's even worse because he moved back into the draft. He gave up a 2020 first-round pick to get McCole Hardman. That is insane to me. So and I don't even care if you do research, just knowing that the value of a first-round pick compared to a second-round pick, you just don't give that up that easily.
And if you're thinking about it, hey, I'm trying to get back into the second round this year, I'll give you a third rounder next year. Or even going round for round, I'm trying to get back into the second round, I'll give you a second rounder. But to instantly jump, I'll give you a better round next year for this pick this year. If I had an early second round pick this year, I would have jumped on that. That is easy.
I don't know who all jumped at that opportunity. No. I know Malfi got it, but I don't know when he sent that out to our text message. I know I sent an offer. I don't know how many people sent an offer at that time, but I'm assuming everyone would have given up a 2020 second for a 2019 second for a 2020 first.
Yeah, you
just do that. That's
yeah. It was very questionable. Comes away with a good draft. Just very, very questionable about how he acquired those draft picks back. And it doesn't make sense because the best player that John could pick next year is now on your roster, or will be potentially on your roster in that draft pick if you don't trade it away. But I just don't get it.
And I acquired, and I can't remember the deal that I made with John, but I acquired.
You acquired a second-round pick for a third-round pick.
Yep. So I gave John a third round in the 2019 class for a 2020 second, which then I gave to Malf in another trade. But that's another example of kind of trying to move up to get somebody who may or may not be even relevant. I forgot who we picked with that. That might have been the...
that was Deontay
Johnson, who could fire. We didn't really talk about him much in Pittsburgh, but he has a good opportunity there. He's going to compete with James Washington and Dante Moncrief for that second or third wide receiver. But anyways, despite that, we're talking about a 2020 second in a deeper class. Just wait a year. You're in a rebuilding phase. Let's make some good decisions.
You need to be
here.
gathering these picks and not trading them away. And then what's going to happen next year? Is this 2021 draft gonna go away for a second rounder in 2020, a third rounder in 2020, a fourth rounder in 2020? Like it's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle, and one that doesn't necessarily make sense to me. And
yeah, just draft strategy in general. I don't understand it. So,
yeah. But we are running a little long here, the longest one we've done yet, probably because we had such a debate at the beginning about the trade that went on and the gross overpay that happened. But I'll drop that eventually.
Thanks, Mal.
When I find out how good Brent's draft picks are.
They could be horrible. And
they could be. They also could be great. But and the 1-1 next year is supposed to be great. But anyway, we're moving on. I just want a quick reminder that at the end of August we'll be cutting down our rosters at the end of the preseason. We'll probably just mention it every show moving forward, just to give everyone a heads up that that's what's going on. But we appreciate the listen, and
we'll be back. We'll be back to break down Division 3 hopefully in another couple weeks. So.
Yep, and then Division 4 after that, and then it's August, and then you know what? We're on to season previews, getting you guys back on a little bit. Talking to people who we haven't talked to already, and just having a lot of fun. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys later.
See you guys later.
Thank you for listening to Tonight We Die Nasty. If you enjoyed our content, be sure to like and share with your friends. If you have any suggestions for us to talk about in our future fantasy endeavors, please leave a comment below and we'll be sure to talk about it. Thank you.